Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Friday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. Is Luka Dončić committing himself to fitness this offseason? Early reports say yes. That's next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday. No matter how or where you get your podcast, this one's always free and never behind paywall. And Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where 35,000 plus subscribers once again have to look at my uncontrasted face because I shaved this morning. And are also, Andy, thinking about the Lakers and Luka Dončić because, oh my, no person that I can think of in the basketball universe is going to be more scrutinized about their physical fitness, about their food choices, about their body shape, and all that kind of stuff more than our guy Luka.
I think Zion Williamson would like a word, but still,
no West Coast. That is fair. Your point.
No Slovenian player.
No Slovenian playing for the Lakers will be.
No, that is absolutely true. But as long as Zion is still in the league,
that's true.
Luka will always have somebody to take a little bit of that heat off him. But if nothing else, Luka has been more recently trashed and more loudly trashed in light of the trade that sent him to the Lakers and the messaging coming out of Dallas that, old Tubby can't be relied on for a max deal, so let's send him out.
That was my nickname in college. So as two people, Andy, who are very clearly and obviously dedicated to physical fitness, I feel like this is a good place to start. There is Luka fitness news.
Nothing better than middle-aged white dudes breaking down the fitness of elite athletes.
Get off your ass, pro.
Every now and then you really stumble upon the fact of what a joke it is that we do what we do.
Kind of, it is. And there is a certain who are you to comment, but look, I mean, you in the NBA, you need to be a certain level of fitness to really truly be among the elite. And Luka, over the course of his career, has gotten by certainly on natural talent, and I'm sure. I don't mean like he doesn't work hard, but.
No, you don't end up that good without working. Like, I don't care how naturally talented you are. Nobody just rolls out of bed. I guess emphasis on rolling with Luke and puts up the type of production and numbers and like insane plays without putting in the work. It doesn't happen.
So it's what Luka does this offseason is incredibly important. The Lakers have made a point. JJ Redick talked very openly at the end of the season about needing to be achieve championship level fitness. He certainly did not exclude Luka from that categorization. They made no effort to imply that Luka was at that level and everybody else needed to catch up. They talked about, he did a good job. He was in with his workouts. He kept up with all that, but they didn't. They made it pretty clear that they believe that Luka can and needs to do better in that regard. And so if you're looking for early signs that maybe Luka is taking it seriously, Jason Gallagher, who is a producer of the Mind the Game podcast with LeBron James and Steve Nash, and oh, by the way, the former host of the show, Lakers head coach JJ Redick, he
also produced The Old Man and the Three, where he worked directly with JJ Redick.
Doesn't seem like somebody who would speak out of turn, especially as a producer of like you got to be careful about this stuff.
Really good.
On an episode of a podcast called The Dumb, and it's not a show I'm familiar with, but that's what he was on. You can find it on YouTube and other places. And so he said this about Luka. I've heard from folks that are pretty honest about the conditioning stuff or whatever, that Luka has already begun to clean slate, like starting anew. He's already like in this mindset of changing a lot about himself. Now, I've heard it before, but not from specific people that have been critical of him. And so, look, he was somebody who's obviously speaking, I think, carefully, using his words carefully. I, in my multiple decades on this planet, have often gotten into the mindset of changing things about myself and maybe not quite gotten all the way there in terms of the execution, particularly when it comes to fitness. Although this body doesn't just have. It's at least an interesting thing. Like the phrasing of that, at the very least, Andy acknowledges that Luka understands that he may not have quite hit the bar in seasons past.
I think there is something to be said about the way Luka left and the way Dallas messaged, we really don't trust him because he is too undisciplined and, frankly, too reckless about his body. I mean, that's really the messaging Dallas was putting out there. And these are not new concerns about Luka. It's not like Luka got traded to the Lakers and then Dallas started a whisper campaign that otherwise sounded completely out of sync with everything we'd ever heard about Luka. This has been a thing with him for a while. If you read The Wonder Boy, the book that Tim McMahon from ESPN wrote about Luka, and really you should, because it's a great look at just how Luka became Luka. His dad was a professional basketball player overseas, and his dad had a reputation, frankly, as somebody that didn't get the most out of his career because he enjoyed a little too much eating and a little too much imbibing himself. And, not like at a problematic level or anything like that, but just the idea that...
No idea, but yes.
Well, no, I'm saying it was not implied in the book that it was at a problematic level. Just so people don't misunderstand. But the idea that, lifestyle and enjoying the finer things got in the way of Luka's dad's career. And clearly, Luka's career is at a level that his dad's never reached. But there has been that concern that whatever is the absolute ceiling that Luka can reach, whether you're talking about as a player or just in terms of availability on an 82-game basis, that fitness and conditioning and, not the willingness to not indulge in everything that he wants, like the willingness to take on a healthier lifestyle, even if it isn't as much fun or as much enjoyable.
Or put in just a matter of putting in the extra 20%. I mean, and look, as you get older, and Luka's not an old man, but he's played professionally in Europe. He's already played professionally for, was he now going into his seventh?
This will be his eighth season.
Eighth season. Okay. So, I mean, you got a lot of, you're starting to pile up the mileage, the injuries are there, and, he plays a lot of ball. He's playing Eurobasket this off season. He plays when they're Olympic qualifiers. He takes that stuff very seriously. There's a lot of basketball, a lot of money. Even in your 20s now, you have to start considering these things and being proactive about stuff because, you may be 26 in chronological age, but his body probably isn't. And before people say how can you be that good if you're not taking, there's a very easy analog for this that Lakers fans will certainly be able to, I think, make a parallel with that I think you can do with Luka. And I'll explain what I mean by that next.
Locked On Lakers is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full swing. Every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, can't-miss moments, whether it's game-winning shot or breakout player. There's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live with player props, performance trends, same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart, win big, You can track the players who consistently show up in the big moments, but also when they put on their superhero capes. And you can figure out exactly how to make your next bet using those trends and that information. You maybe take that knowledge, roll it into a same game parlay. You press things up, you keep it interesting, you keep it exciting. And if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. You head now to FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you get $200 in bonus bets. So pick something super obvious for that $5 bet. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA.
So we'll get in a second to some interesting stuff that's been written in a couple places over the last couple days about things that playoff teams that are teams that are no longer in the playoffs, teams that are out and aspiring for higher things can learn from the teams that are still in. So we'll get to that. Some interesting things on that those lists. But I think the point that you're making about ceilings and maximizing your ceiling. The easy analog here for Lakers fans is Shaq. Like, Shaquille O'Neal is unquestionably one of the most dominant players the league has ever seen. At his peak, you could make an argument that, peak Shaq was maybe it's his, he would make it, it's his nickname, the most dominant player ever in individual, just in individual slices of moments. I'm not saying yes or no, but I'm saying you could make that argument.
It would probably be him or Wilt, just in terms of pure unstoppable domination. So, yeah. This is unguardable.
What you also cannot argue, even if you are a believer that Shaq is in individual, just that one moment peak is the most dominant ever. That peak didn't last long enough. That his dominance was short-circuited by his own unwillingness to really take care of himself, care of his body. Everybody got hurt on company time. I'll heal on company time. All that stuff, and that fundamentally was a major source of the gripes that Kobe had with him. Is that Shaq just didn't take that stuff as seriously as Kobe did. Few people have, but a lot of these guys, a lot of lesser players than Kobe and Shaq, actually, that's how they stayed in the league. Obviously, a guy like LeBron has been investing in his body for years and years, and a lot of people hope that sort of rubs off on Luka. But I think it's that. I think he's got to be aware of what people are saying about him. He certainly has to be aware of what it means if he does come to camp out of shape or not in good shape, like how that validates Nico Harrison.
The other side of that too, and the Nico piece of this and how this became personal. One of the things that you hear from multiple reports, people that have been around Luka, is that loyalty means a lot to him. Like it is a concept that is extremely important to him. He, I know, felt like he was offering that loyalty to Dallas. He never had any plans of leaving. He had envisioned himself as a Dallas lifer. And it wasn't just that he got traded. He got traded in a way that was unceremonious and, I would imagine, humiliating on a lot of levels. And the hope is that you use Nico as like an avatar for your spite. And everything that you want to prove Nico wrong can be demonstrated in the form of what would feel like a revenge body. Like you come into training camp looking the best that you ever had. And there will be there will be cynics and skeptics who say this would have never happened had Nico not made the trade. Therefore, Nico is kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. And that may be right, but here's the deal. I don't care. Like, from a Laker fan's perspective, not our problem. That's for them to sort out and, look in the mirror and figure out what went wrong. All that matters is what Luka does with the Lakers moving forward. And if he does this more because it's about double middle fingers than it is, I guess, professional pride or wanting to maximize his career, I don't really care. I would prefer it be more about like recognizing the value, because I think that lasts better. I think in the short term,
yeah.
I think ultimately what would happen is the motivation might not stay the same I would think that if he stays in shape for the rest of the time he's with the Lakers, assuming that's multiple years, that's not going to be fueled purely by spite. That's going to be fueled by recognizing what it does for you. I'm just saying if the impetus is all about double middle fingers, I don't care.
I can
as long as it happens.
The interesting thing about it to me too is like, obviously, look, if he's a little bit thinner, you can see if guys are a little bit lighter, this and that. But I mean, Jokic is a really good example of this because he, with Denver, there were years where, he's not quite in NBA shape and this, that, and whatever. And you kind of look up over the last couple of seasons and Jokic has a motor and endurance like few players in the league, plays huge minutes, gets up and down the floor, all that stuff. But he still doesn't look like Giannis, or it doesn't look like, LeBron, or like he's not yoked out and all this other kind of stuff. He just has the stamina and the endurance. Obviously, he's a big guy. He has the strength. And so, I think a lot of ways, like the proof with Luka will be sort of in the appearance, but mostly in what it looks like on the floor, and how it translates. I'm not expecting Luka to show up, looking like he's going to be on the cover of Men's Fitness or something like that. Like it's just, but it is critical that he meet the standard that JJ Redick and the rest of the coaching staff is talking about. So we'll see. I mean, we will get an early look because he's playing Eurobasket, which both can help him get ready for the season, but also something that he needs to be ready to go play in, and having time to sit at the end of the season because the Lakers are out of the playoffs will help all of these things as well. Interesting stories that have been put out. There's a version of this on ESPN.com written by Zach Cram. Jovan Buha at The Athletic wrote something similar specific to the Lakers about the types of things that teams that are not in the playoffs, including the Lakers, can learn from who's still here. In terms of the four teams playing in the conference finals. And there were a lot of interesting things to pull out of it, things that related to the Lakers on these lists, which have some overlap to them. You want to break down maybe a couple things that you pulled out of them there? They talk about turnovers, the depth, identity, how to hide, one of the interesting ones on the ESPN list, how to hide an offensive minded guard on defense. Might apply to the Lakers. I mean, maybe. So there are a lot of places to start.
Guards. One of the things that Zach Cram pointed out was the importance of reliable rotation depth. And also, I would add to this rotational balance, because I think in the case of the Lakers, they were pretty hand in hand. And, we talked about this a lot over the course of the playoffs and post-game reactions. And I still maintain that JJ played a role in the rotational depth issues for the Lakers by bailing out on too many guys too quickly. Like you have to be willing to push some buttons other than the absolute safest or best, but it doesn't change the fact that the Lakers not just needed better depth behind LeBron and Luka and Austin, if you consider them their stars. The Lakers have certainly treated them that way. But they also need specifically more two-way guys. Like they're top four and two-way guys that provide balance. Their top four guys this season, I think, are Luka, LeBron, Austin, Rui. I think that is pretty difficult to refute. It's four guys that are primarily offensive first players. Like LeBron at his best can still be a very plus defender, but it often comes with offensive sacrifice. Sometimes that can be balanced out well. We saw that there would be games where Luka would spend a lot of the first quarter, but a lot of the first half setting the table. LeBron would close, but for the most part, I think LeBron is still considered an offense first player. Like Rui's had two-way moments, and I think he actually improved a lot as a defender over the course of last season. Still more of an offensive guy. I don't think Reeves or Luka are quite as bad as their defensive reputations, but they're not plus defenders.
No, and they certainly require a certain degree of protection around them.
Right.
If not protection, a certain structure that allows them to play to their strengths and hide some of their weaknesses.
Right. And then you get to someone like DFS, who on paper might be their best two-way player or sort of slotted to be that guy, but he doesn't take enough shots. He can disappear offensively. And I think he doesn't provide quite the defensive versatility that I think people hoped for when they traded for him. Like, it's telling that even with him on the roster, JJ often opted to put Rui on guards like Steph and Ant and the like. Like, DFS, LeBron, Rui, and Luka are all arguably fours defensively. So there's an imbalance. Yeah. Like, Vando, I think, could do a little bit more offensively than the Lakers use him, but he's still a defense first guy. Like Jordan Goodwin, defense first. Dalton Connect, all offense. Like, they need to find more balance within the rotation. I think the balance, in a lot of ways, two-way balance, is going to be the key to finding more depth.
Because it's a tricky proposition. We'll stay on this for a second, after the break. But it's a tricky proposition. But there's a team, certainly a couple teams that you can look at of this remaining four and point very clearly to where like that kind of thing works. And we'll get to that next. I mean, I think a great example of what you're talking about is the Knicks, where you have Brunson is a lesser defender than both Luka and Reeves. I think Brunson is worse than both of those guys defensively. So, I mean, Cat has moments where, he blocks shot, but like he's never, he's a pretty good rebounder, but he's never been considered a great defender. That's always been one of the knocks on him. But like you start looking around the rest of that thing and you've got Bridges, who, is not just a good defender, but also somebody who can score a little bit for you and hit some 3-pointers and all that kind of stuff. Anunoby is somebody who has a legitimate two-way reputation. Josh Hart, averages 10 rebounds a game as a guard. I mean, like, so they have support from guys who can score 15 points a night, relatively without taxing them too much. And every once in a while you look up and OG's got 32, or Josh Hart has 26, or Mikal Bridges hits 8 3-pointers. It's like that kind of offensive production from your defensive oriented players, or the guys who are designed to be there to be the glue that holds the stars together. That just doesn't exist with the Lakers. I mean, I think the Lakers, because of that, had to scheme their way around defenses. Like, you see a lot of those times where why is Rui matched up with, a guard? Or why is it? Because eventually, you're trying to like preempt some of the switch hunting. You're trying to and force certain things. The help can come from somewhere else and set up these scenarios, but it requires a lot of work to engineer around things. And when the Lakers got to the playoffs, they were even kind of doubly screwed in terms of the amount of choices that they had, buttons that JJ could press, because they had no rim protection. None.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up. The all-defense teams came out today, and not unexpectedly, no Laker made first or second team all-defense, but not
it could have happened had the trade not happened. AD might have landed somewhere.
Maybe, but I don't know if he would. Maybe I don't know if he would have been healthy enough to qualify. I'm guessing
that's true. I forget the rules.
I'm guessing no Laker ends up making it. It's a reminder of how impractical the defensive surge that the Lakers had, like the style of that surge, even acknowledging the effectiveness of it for a few months. Like, in the end, you can only be better than the sum of your parts for so long. And other than Denver, no team had as many wins, 50 wins, without at least one guy getting one vote than the Lakers. Every team that was 50 wins or higher had at least one guy who got one vote for all defense. But like, this speaks to, I brought him up a few times, one of the reasons why I'm interested in Nick Claxton. Like, beyond the fact that I think he is realistically gettable and he fits reasonably well as the prototype Luka center, or what we believe to be that, what Luka likes. And he's under contract for a few more years. So unlike, Daniel Gafford, for example, there's no question about what's his next payday going to be. You know what Claxton's going to cost for a few years, and you work with that. And I think it's reasonable. He's somebody that is solid enough on both ends. Like, on about 27 minutes a game, he averaged like 10, 7, 1.5. and he's had better averages with better teams, but like it's not world beating, but he doesn't kill you on either end. If you need some scoring, you can play Claxton. If you need defense, you can play Claxton. Like, he is somebody that I think can just balance the team a little bit more. One of the things I think they should be looking for is this a player that you can picture being on the court a fair amount in a variety of scenarios? I think Claxton is actually one of those guys.
Well, yeah, I think it's certainly possible. And they're not going to probably not going to have their choice of like perfect centers to be able to bring in.
And he's not, to be clear, he isn't. He's not a lead.
Yeah, but he's less imperfect in my opinion than somebody like Daniel Gafford, who's an excellent shot blocker and can be a good rebounder and shoots at a high percentage. Because mostly finishes the rim and dunks and things like that. Yeah. But the reason he's never been able to translate what looked like he's a great fantasy player, but part of the reason he's never been able to translate that into a steady starting gig, even with a bad team like Washington, teams are like excited to pay him, a young player, all that stuff, is because he's not a great defender. He's not a team defender, at least certainly by reputation, that can anchor a defense with rim protection, understands and reads. In a lot of ways, especially if you really let your big stay closer to the basket. In a lot of ways, they're like the goalie in hockey or in soccer. Like they see everything in front of them. They're communicating, they're talking, they're making the rotation, they're anticipating plays. And that apparently is not something we'll get deeper scouting reports on him before the end of the summer. But that's apparently not what Gafford excels at. So what's interesting, because one of these things you mentioned before, and there's more on this list, including identity, which is a big one that I don't think we'll have time for today. Maybe we'll save for next week.
Definitely want to get into that one.
But you talk about depth. The depth question is fascinating because it can mean different things. It's not just how many players are you playing. It's also how good are the players that you are playing, and how many things can those players do? You talk about the redundancy of the Lakers being too oriented towards offense. Because they don't have enough chips. Like ideally you would, let's keep Rui and we'll keep Austin and we'll fill in around them. And then we'll have even, more good players in this. They may not have the luxury of being able to do that. So it might be the idea might be you take Rui and you turn him into as good of a player that fills a hole and adds more of that balance and depth as you possibly can. Hopefully not sacrificing too much of what Rui gives you in terms of three-point shooting and, second, production with a second unit, whatever it might be. You take Reeves and try to turn him into, and I'm not advocating that they have to trade either one of these guys, but if you do, it's to try to create the kind of depth that the Knicks have, because you don't have enough tools to create the depth that the Thunder have. The Thunder, their depth in part is we've got 12 guys that we can put on the floor confidently and mix and match parts as we need it every night. The Knicks don't do it that way. The Knicks have 6 guys, but there's 6 guys, 4 of them can do all kinds of things.
I think it's going to be difficult for the Lakers to, the Knicks have 6 guys like that.
Just clarify. I don't think they can get guys as good as the Knicks have.
Well, that's why I was
closer to the model that they have to follow.
Well, I don't know. We can get more into this next week. I actually look at a team like the Pacers as potentially more of the model of what the Lakers could theoretically be looking for, because there's a lot of depth that they have there. But it's a lot of depth. And this is something I know I wanted to mention. It was something Zach Cram brought up as well. They've got guys that are second team, third team flyers that have worked out really well. And the Lakers have had a recent success story in that with Rui. Like Rui was a second team flyer that they did very, very well with. And I think the Lakers are going to have to really do their homework with a lot of available free agents on a budget, because they are likely, or trade pieces that are considered like B to B plus level players. Like it's going to be, there are only so many A's, if any, like A level.
I think they're going to have to look for guys who are seen as C's. that actually, if you use them right, are Bs.
Sure. Yeah.
Or
Something like that.
that turn out to be B minuses, or Ds that turn out to be C pluses. I mean,
we'll see. I mean, the variance could depend on the player that you're talking about, how you think they can use them, who's available, whatever. But the point being, I think that they're going to, and this is something we've talked about before with Rob Pelinka and our, I would say, wavering contentment in his ability to drill down on the details. They're going to have to be really detail oriented this offseason, because they're not going to have, I think, the ability to go after a lot of, can't miss, everybody understands exactly why you're going after that guy type of player. They're going to be needing to try to hit in some unexpected ways. And they're going to have to be creative, and they're going to have to be smart, and they're going to have to be very targeted in what they're looking for. But again, somebody like Rui has been far better as a Laker than he ever was with the Wizards. Some of that is the Lakers have had better structure and players like LeBron and AD around Rui, and that's going to make Rui's job easier. But I think they've also been better at figuring out the stuff Rui's actually good at.
There's a template here that, even beyond the Pacers, that LA fans will understand. And I will get into that when we talk about identity next week. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go hang out with 35,000 plus subscribers. 3-day weekend coming up. Everyone have a great Memorial Day. We'll be back next week. Not exactly sure, Monday or Tuesday, but we'll see you next time.